Enthusiasts always say we want more wagons, and in a world of crossovers, Toyota has finally delivered. Welcome to Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and this is the 2025 Toyota Crown Signia. This is more or less a Subaru Outback competitor of sorts, although the Outback, as we just talked about a few weeks ago, is becoming more of an SUV. So is this maybe the perfect Outback replacement if you're a diehard fan? Well, let's find out. So looking at the Crown Signia, this is the second Crown model that we get from Japan for the US market, and this is, if we pan over this way, very much a station wagon if you look at it. It's just barely a crossover, sorta, kinda, but it's wagony if we look at the proportions. It's actually a very good looking car, which is not something I would necessarily say about a, quote, crossover, but I quite like it. Now, as far as what you've got for powertrain, all of these are going to be hybrids that use a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder up here with an electric motor that acts as kind of a generator. That's the first part of the hybrid system. There's a second electric motor that can drive the front wheels that makes 199 pound-feet of torque, and then you've got another electric motor back here on the back axle that gives you E all-wheel drive that can make another 89 pound-feet of torque. So altogether, Toyota does not list the complete system output for torque, but it makes 240 horsepower, and torque-wise, as we'll talk about in the driving portion of all this, it makes, I think, more than enough. Now, these are all going to be all-wheel drive, given you've got that back motor on the back axle. It is E all-wheel drive, so there's no physical connection between the two axles. Talk about how that works in a second. And this is Toyota's Gen 4 hybrid system. So this is not their newest setup, but it is fairly recent. They've seen it on a few of their other models. This whole drivetrain is more or less pulled from the Lexus RX 350h, if you've seen or looked at one of those. This is kind of a almost budget RX, if you really think of it that way. This replaced the Venza, which was kind of a budget RX, although this is by far more wagony than the RX ever will be. Now, that's about it for the exciting hardware, mildly exciting hardware, whatever. Let's take a quick interior tour because I do have some qualms about all this, and then we'll get out on the road and talk about how it drives. So looking inside the Crown Signia, it is a very nice looking interior at first glance. I love this color, this kind of caramel brown toffee color, and it all presents really, really well. Now this is going to be a platinum, but you can get the XLE as well. But this one here has everything you can get on it, more or less. So we've got a digital gauge cluster screen here, followed by another screen over here for your main infotainment. And this is pretty typical Toyota. At this point, it runs their newest operating system. You have a nice physical volume knob here and physical controls for your climate control. Very, very nice to have. Now this one has heated and ventilated seats and a heated steering wheel. And this has kind of an imitation of the Lexus Climate Concierge, in which all of this can operate automatically based on the automatic temperature setting you have. Looking further down, you do have a wireless charger here that is kind of an awkward spot, but it does work. There are some camera views here. It's got the full 360 setup that it'll do for you and show you everything you've got. And a couple cup holders, some USB-C ports, typical Toyota hybrid shifter. If you've been in a Prius or some other hybrids of theirs, you'll recognize this. Drive mode control, brake hold. There is an EV mode. This is just a regular hybrid. It's not a plug-in, but there is an EV mode that will kind of force it to stay in electric power as long as it absolutely can. And then your parking brake and your traction control. Looking up here, we do have a digital rear view mirror if you like that sort of thing. And then a panoramic sunroof that does not open despite having that beam there in the middle. At least it gives you some good light into the second row. Now I want to talk about the interior here from the perspective of a tall human, because I'm 6'1", and if I sit up like I want to actually drive this, I don't fit in this car. The seating position of this thing is so bad for me. My head is in the roof. This A-pillar right here really stretches. It's so raked to get the look of the body style that they wanted, which is fine, but then you've got a high floor, and that collectively makes this really tricky for tall people. If you've got a tall torso, you may not fit in here. This is, I feel, wedged in. And that mixed with how this interior is laid out, the dashboard is fairly high, so I feel like I'm equal parts too big for the car and kind of sitting on it, not in it. And then I also feel like I'm in a bit of a bathtub. The door sills are a little tall, the dashboard's a little tall, and all of that combined, this for me at my size is not a comfortable place to spend much time. But if you are shorter than me, you'll probably like it. And if you're more leg than torso, you'll also probably like it. It's just how I am proportioned. So it really depends on how you are built. Definitely go do a test sit. But if you're on the taller end of humanity, you may have some challenges. Okay, so driving the Crown Signia. Once I get past, every time I'm in here, I just like, wow, my head is in the ceiling in the pillar. But this is typical Toyota hybrid, which is to say it's generally quite good. It's pretty unobtrusive if you keep your foot out of it. I'll talk more about that here in just a second. But it does a nice job as far as doing hybrid things, which is to say between the electric motors, there is so much torque that it actually can operate on electric power pretty often, more than I think other hybrids can. And that to me is really key because it feels like it has more hybrid operation than a lot of other hybrids I've driven, if that makes sense. It can be a hybrid more often. So I do appreciate that. And then off the line, it can be fairly snappy. It's got plenty of torque. 240 horsepower is not gonna light your hair on fire, but it's enough. And this is a planetary gear CVT, not a belt CVT, but it's an eCVT that if you've been in any other Toyota hybrid, it's gonna be the same feel. Now, the downside to all this is that it can be a little noisy. So as I roll into it here, plenty quick, but oh, it just gets kind of droney and not pleasant when you're really laying into it for accelerating down an on-ramp, leaving a stoplight really aggressively, pulling out to pass someone, whatever. That's not this car's time to shine. Where it does do better is when you're in traffic and you want to just accelerate with the pace of everyone else. We're all just kind of sloughing around because most people's heads are, not paying attention to driving. So in that case, this does a really, really nice job. These are rated at like 38 miles a gallon combined. Some people have achieved that or close to it. Others have achieved low 30s, but either way, it runs as a hybrid quite a bit. And like now I'm accelerating off the line just in full battery mode, and it feels really pleasant. And even when the gas motor kicks in, it runs at a lower RPM. It's not making a ton of racket. So keep your foot to 50% throttle or less, and it's not going to be so bad. Now, as far as the ride in here, I've actually enjoyed it quite a bit. This being the higher trim level, it is on bigger wheels. They're 21s, and minimal sidewall, but it's still fairly soft. I'm a fan of this. We focus mostly on performance cars and things that tow, and not something like this. However, not everything has to be a sports car, and sometimes you just want a comfortable, quiet daily driver. This is that. The ride is far more toward the plush side of things than the sporty and aggressive side of things, and I like that. It is a pleasant place to spend time. The ride is very well damped. I think the body control is good, although you do get some body roll, but kind of what you expect. And then as we're slowing down for this red light, generally the brake pedal feels good. It will do some regenerative braking, and then obviously transitions over to the actual physical brakes. And generally that pedal feel is very, very good. As you lay into the pedal more, feels pretty nice. The one thing that is weird, and this is a Toyota hybrid thing as of late, if you just lift your foot off the accelerator and let it kind of coast, it will regen, and then it will regen stronger. And that is kind of weird because to me, it's not necessarily predictable. So I just have a tricky time understanding when it's going to get more aggressive versus when it's going to just let me do what I'm expecting out of the car. And it's just a little inconsistent. But braking in general, very confidence inspiring. And then steering is steering. It's not going to be crazy good or crazy bad. It's what you expect out of a car like this. I think it's nicely weighted. It's not too loose. It's not too heavy. Again, feels appropriate for what the car is. So I think this drives pretty well. I don't like the noise that you get out of the hybrid system. And apparently the 5th gen Toyota hybrid setup, which is on the new Camry hybrid, among some others, that is apparently better for NVH, noise, vibration, and harshness. So some of this is not quite as prevalent. Now, you're not going to be laying in it all the time, but for what this costs, this is about $50,000. I would just prefer that it not quite sound like this, although I'd rather this make this sound than a Lexus RX make this sound. So nothing else, there is that. Now, would you be purchasing this over an RX? I think the biggest thing, like, I love the fact that this is a wagon. You call it a crossover, call it an SUV, call it whatever you want to sell it to people, but this is a wagon. It has pretty decent space in the cargo area, pretty decent space in the second row. It doesn't Outback as well as an Outbacks. That is my biggest problem with it. Toyota has not figured out how to use the interior space of this car as well as they need to, and it just feels tight in here compared to a current Outback. And I had some hopes that this would be kind of a good Outback replacement, especially as we know we're losing the one. It's going to become more traditional. And it's not doing it for me in that sense. So that's a bit of a bummer. I think if you fit in it, it's a pleasant car. I think it's a nice alternative to the traditional, RAV4 style of crossover where it's much more boxy and much more faux off-road. No one is even pretending they're going to take a Crown Signia off-road. It feels very JDM to me. It's kind of fun because it feels like they just pulled it over from a different market and said, yeah, we're going to sell it here, which is what older Japanese cars used to be, 80s and 90s, when they're first really growing in popularity here in the United States. It was a little bit more of that, and that was kind of more interesting versus, oh, we're all assimilating into whatever consumers want. They said, we know what consumers want, we're going to give you this. This is a little more interesting in that regard. So I think that's kind of neat. I just wish I fit in it better. And the Crown sedan is bizarre to me. This is at least interesting bizarre. And I think this is actually fairly well executed for what it is. I wish the packaging was a little different. So, interesting vehicle. I think it fills a spot in Toyota's lineup that maybe not a lot of people are asking for necessarily, but it's a good hybrid. Oh, here's that regen that I said it's stronger now than it was. I don't know what it's doing, but it fills a spot in Toyota's lineup where, if you don't want a RAV4, but you don't want something bigger, but then you don't necessarily want a Lexus hybrid for some reason, this is something interesting that doesn't look like many other things on the market, and the hybrid system will be reliable. Baby, that's a one-way street. Tesla drivers. Where was I? This fills an interesting spot in the lineup. The only challenge here is that you can buy an RX for roughly what this costs. So, pick what you want for the shape of it. I like the fact that Toyota is able to offer something like this that's not just the typical, basic crossover. But yeah, it fills a void, however small, in their lineup. And I think where this really shines is actually as a city vehicle. It's the hybrid system's great. I've been enjoying just kind of bopping around DC in it. It's quiet enough on the interstate when you get it up to 60, 70 miles an hour. But for me, a hybrid, for fuel economy reasons, will be better in the city by default. And this, like I said, given the torque that these electric motors make versus some other hybrids I've driven lately, this actually can run on battery more often than others can, which I do think is pretty neat. So just a very interesting vehicle. It's not going to be for everyone, and I think Toyota knows that. They've got more mainstream feeling crossovers in their lineup that, kind of fulfill this niche of 5 seats and some cargo space and, whatever. So if you're looking for something that's not the normal, this might be worth checking out. Is it an Outback replacement? Sorta. But other than that, I do think it's kind of neat if you fit in it. So those are my thoughts on the 2025 Toyota Crown Signia. Thank you so much for coming along as always. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe right here on YouTube. Tell all your friends. Follow us everywhere else, and head over to outmotorsports.com. We've got a whole community over there of LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors who would love to be your new best friends if you are indeed one of us. Until next time, stay safe, be well. See you again soon.